get into the fun part. There's no planned fire drills. If you hear alarms, be alarmed. Exit the building sensibly, cautiously.
Just follow me, it's fine.
Well, that might be neither sensible nor cautious, but exit, all the best. And if the people online could please keep their mics muted, unless they're actually commenting, simply so that everybody can get the best of reception. So my name is Kim Darrington. I'm a senior executive for market modernisation team at the RUA. And we are delighted, because you're always delighted when you're sat in front of people, right? You never use that word in real life. But we're delighted to have CGI with us, who are talking around how technology should be used to facilitate human interactions in the market. Obviously, this is high tech is something that's coming. I'm sure you've probably all seen parts of the blueprint. So this is a subject that's very much at the fore of how we can interact with technology better, and continue to be friends with it, as opposed to terrified of it. So without further ado, I will introduce John Gavey, Tim Scott-Simmons and Darren Rudd, and they are going to take it away. One further point they have asked me to mention, which I nearly forgot, is that there will be a couple of Slido polls. They're going to take you through the how-to, but please do get involved. That works both for the people in the room and the people online. So please do keep your eye out, and they'll let you know how to work those when they come up.
All right, thank you very much. Speaking of high tech, I have one job to do, which is press the button over here to do that. Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming in person and virtually. I hope you can see me. I want to start by saying thank you to the IUA, in particular Kim and Deborah, who helped bring this all together. Deborah's been nothing short of incredibly patient with me. I was saying to her, it's a bit like waiting for people to turn up your birthday party to see whether it's actually going to turn up to the room today. So it's nice to see a few people here. We're really excited to be here. And the topic for today's discussion, I've got to stress, it is a discussion, so audience participation is essential. Is one that's at the heart of our strategic plans for the coming 12 months, but has actually been something we've been thinking about for quite a long time. So we're going to take you on a little bit of a journey as to why we're here, a bit about us, which I'll do very, very quickly, and then we'll get on to the exciting stuff in the main event. So as we said, we're going to draw this to a close at 2 p.m. We have got some drinks and refreshments afterwards, so if you can stay and hang on, we'd love to have the opportunity to have a conversation with you based on what we've discussed today. And as Kim's pointed out, we're going to be doing a Slido poll, and Darren will talk you through how we do that. For those of you that requested more information from us when you signed up to this, you have been automatically entered into a draw. Having briefly worked in London markets, I know first place prize of 12 bottles of wine is a surefire winner to get popularity. If you're not fortunate enough to win that, there's an Echo Dot as well, which I'm sure you could either keep or re-gift. If you still want to be involved in it, and if you're listening to this online as well, please go back into the invitation and simply request some information from us. And we'll be sure to include you in the draw, and we'll do it later on this week. So, on to the main event. So, as we've already done introductions, my name is John Gavey. I'm a director at CGI. I'm joined by Darren Rudd, who's our head of consulting, and Tim Scott-Simmons, who's our CTO. We've also got our exec sponsor in the room, Juliet. If you want to give everyone a wave, Juliet Lockstone, who's head of insurance, VP insurance at CGI. We've also got a couple other people here as well. So we've got a wealth of knowledge, lots of experience, very little time to share it with you. So I won't dwell too long on that. But we really want to have some conversations, so come and say hello. I've worked in the financial services industry in London markets and insurance markets for the best part of a decade. And I've done everything from straightforward solution resolve consulting in line with regulatory requirements and providing IP, those sorts of things, through to actual business outcomes and solving challenges. And that's the thing that we really want to focus on today. It's about identifying business outcomes, making sure you're talking about the right problem, and ultimately increasing your odds of success. Before we go any further, I'll just explain who we are for those of you who don't know us, if you're unfamiliar with us. CGI are known as a global systems integrator. We differentiate ourselves in a number of different ways, but through managed services, for example, we're responsible for some of the UK's largest IT operations, projects and technologies, as well as being held accountable for some of the most valuable data and systems through our accredited and globally recognized cybersecurity credentials. We leverage our global capacity. As you can see, we're not a small business. We're around 6,500 people in the UK, building up to 90,000. We literally serve thousands and thousands of customers in hundreds of markets. And we draw from every single one of them to make sure we're bringing the most innovative technologies to your market. And we have, over the last 12 to 18 months, exercised some real rigor and discipline in our attempts to discover where in the underwriting process is the most likely to respond well to innovation. We've also been very careful to point out we're not simply just looking for business requirements, because that doesn't necessarily solve the challenge. We're more akin to solving outcomes and a consultative-based approach. And our overall goal is allowing underwriters to write more, better business. Simple as that. We've had to do our due diligence. So we've taken the time to sit down with underwriters, some of whom have joined us in the room. It's good to see you, and also are joining us virtually. And we're sort of testing our insight and our feedback that we're hearing from you to make sure we're on the right track. That process doesn't stop. So that's part of what we're about today. We want to know that what you're hearing from us is right, and it's going to add value to you as individuals in your organisation. We've also consulted with operational teams so that we can understand the pain points in delivering, I dare to use it, transformational change, resource requirements, cost and value outcomes, and also with C-suite as well, to make sure that anything that we do for an individual within an organisation is aligning to your overall goals. Okay. As a business, as you can see, we're very involved in the market, and it's not just making sure we're listening to what you're saying at the coalface by attending events like the London Market Conference, but thanks to work with clients, as I've already said, and understanding their challenges, and through the work with associations like the RUA, who we have a great relationship with. We've also run breakfast meetings that some of you have attended. We've really enjoyed getting your feedback. We're hoping to build a collective and well-rounded view of the market. We've learned a lot over the last year, so we're going to share with you how we believe we can add technology and people to provide continuous improvement in your businesses. So I'm proud to announce, and CGI are proud to announce, that in the new year, we will be bringing an innovative new product to the market in Workbench that we feel is incredibly well informed. It focuses on outcomes through the consultative approach that I've already explained, and really recognizing that a single market solution or one size fits all just probably won't work in this market, right? Because you all work differently, you all have different asks and needs, but are we solving the right problems? And this is about giving underwriters more time, making technology work for you, steering away from transformation as a concept that traditionally looks to change the way you work. And the feedback that we're being told is that that's not what you want. You want to enhance the way you're working. We are looking for new clients who are prepared to be open and honest with us, and tell us what they need from a technology supplier, so we can bring the best pairing of tech and solution. So if we haven't had the chance to speak to you yet, please do get in touch, because we're an open book. We'd love to have a conversation and find out what really is going to make you tick. Enough of the sales pitch. I think I'm allowed one of those, but do come and talk to us, because we have looked at this and we're taking a realistic and pragmatic approach to it. Quick check of the agenda. So the topics that we will cover here, and actually understanding the theme of the day, that underwriting is still human, is really, really important to us. We're saying that whilst innovation is coming to the market, and perhaps slowly, but we all recognise, I think, that it is coming, and we either need to adapt, get on board, or just accept it. It should enhance your business's opportunity to be more successful, and an underwriter's role to write more better business. Darren will explain shortly that we believe tech should empower an individual rather than replace. But before I hand over, I just want you to think, whilst we're going through this, if you had more time in your job day to day, whatever that might look like, whatever tasks that might be that are resolved, what would you do with it? Would you be able to have more successful conversations? Because that's really what we want to get from you guys, and hopefully we're going to be able to provide. Thank you for listening, and I'll hand over to you.
Thanks, John. Good to meet you all. John is the salesman, so we'll finish with the sales pitch there. And what I wanted to do today was talk to you about some of our experience about how you make things happen in the market where you can be more successful. So first place that we're going to start is to talk about how you actually frame your problem statement. See a lot of problems in the market where we don't quite get that right up front. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how we shape that, and Kieran knows we've had conversations before about how that shapes through. Then I'll pass over to Tim, just talk a little bit about why we think the future of underwriting is still very human. Technology is great, but there are some pragmatic views on how you need to look at that. And then finally, so take a look at how you can be successful. So technology is great, change is difficult, but how do you actually bring things together that can actually make sure that you can be more successful? And unfortunately, there are no software silver bullets. I'll cover that right up front now. But there are ways that you can leverage it to be really successful. And then hopefully we'll have enough time at the end there, if I can keep my thing open so I'm tracking how long I'm talking about. We'll have a Q&A session, but talking questions, and this is where we'll find whether we all like technology or not. Just wanted to run a quick Slido poll. So if you want to quickly get your phones out, you don't have to, but if you point your camera at the, that's because I'm looking at this and I haven't done that. There we go. That helps. If you point it at the QR code, technology fail already, that should take you through to a quick Slido poll. We'll keep it in the background. If you just want to answer the question that's on there now, then we'll take a review of that right at the end. If there are any other problems, then we'll work it out at the end. So, and again, anybody who's watching this remotely, you can take a look yourself and you should be able to catch the QR code there. We'll pop it up another couple of times as well if there are any problems. Just give people a quick second. And if you do want to ask questions as well, particularly those who are remote, feel free to add them to the Q&A and we'll try to get round to them, or we'll come back to you afterwards. We're not getting Wi-Fi actually in the room. Nice to see technology's working with me already. Okay, so problems we're trying to solve, and I keep looking at this one and not that one. I've got to do two things at once, not good as a man. I don't need to tell any of you in the market, in the room, there's a lot going on in the market at the moment. Blueprint 2, there's lots of noise going on at the moment around the CDR, the IMRC. We're looking at potentially the API gateway coming through. There's a big push to move data through the market much more quickly. But there's also a lot of other initiatives going on about how you leverage that data and how you're going to use that in practice. So people like Key are now coming out and changing the way potentially we think about the follow market. I'm going to do it the right way around this time. But there's also a lot of challenges on us as a market. So cost is coming through, particularly, we're all suffering from the cost of living crisis, but organizations and our customers are also seeing that. Customer expectations are changing. People want more from us as insurers and organizations. It's a competitive market, always has been, but probably more so now than ever, particularly around new entrants coming in, different ways of using data. So that model is shifting. We are working as we are today in a hybrid model that changes the way that we're used to working, creates some new challenges. And we were speaking to a lot of the group earlier on last week, actually, around the war for talent, or the push on talent. How do we get people back and interested, particularly young people? And I see some younger faces in the room, about how we get people excited about the business. And then finally, compliance is everywhere. We're in a regulated business. It's just going to get more difficult. So there's lots of pull factors. We want to do things differently in the market. And I've been in the market now for over 25 years. This is probably the first time I've seen some real push to do things differently that I think might actually get there. But there's also a lot of pressures on us as organisations to do things differently. So that really comes down to really making sure that we understand and ask ourselves the question, what problems are we trying to solve? So when we're looking at underwriting, can you press it for me?
I'll do that, yeah.
That'll help. See, man, trying to do two things at once doesn't work. I think that's a really important question. And I want to use a quick analogy as to why it's important. Now, you should think, well, that's easy. It's obvious whenever we start a project, we should just be asking ourselves what problem we're solving. A lot of the time, we don't really do that well enough. I'll give you an analogy. So there's been a lot of press recently around self-driving cars and automation. I was hoping that, and I made a bet with my wife that I was going to win on this one, but I've lost it, that my daughter wouldn't need to learn to drive. About 4, 5, 6 years ago, I said, cars will be driving themselves. I won't need to pass. I'm now looking for a driving instructor. I need to actually buy some lessons. So one of the big things that self-driving cars was going to solve, or we were looking to solve, was to reduce the loss of life. How do we take the human out of the loop and actually avoid problems and challenges, because people get distracted, they make mistakes, leads to loss of life. So one of the big pushes there, the technologies companies looked at it and went, great, okay, we can drive AI to actually take the human out of the process and replace it with a machine. 100 billion invested to date, 10 years, you still can't go out today and buy a self-driving car. So hence I'm buying driving lessons. But when you look at the problem, one of the key suppliers in the market, a CEO from Luminar Technologies, who provides the LiDAR, which is the clever radar that looks out and helps computers see, he looked at the problem in a slightly different way. So the problem is, I want to avoid people making mistakes, but actually people are pretty good at driving cars. They drive millions of miles every year. How can I wrap that person? How can I use the technology to actually help the person drive better, to make less mistakes? And he also looked at the technology and went, even if I wanted to take the person out of the car, we're years away from that. Even 10 years ago, he realized he wasn't going to get there. He reframed the problem and looked at it and said, okay, how do I help the person be better? So wrap the person with new tools and capabilities to make them work better. So his technology and his capabilities have been building basically an uncrashable car. And there's been a big shift in the market recently where a lot of these self-driving cars have now been shut down, and they're moving much more into driving aid. So my car today actually helps me make sure that I'm not going to crash into the car and back and try and keep in line. So it was just looking at the problem from a different perspective, really understanding where the technology can get you, and then seeing with the technology, how can I solve the same problem? Next thing. There's two other areas as well when I look at how you can be successful in the market, and when you're looking at change programs where we get it wrong. The first is, as I said, we're framing the question in the wrong way, often with the technology not being quite as good as we'd like it to be. The second one is where we focus a little bit too much on ourselves and we're solving the problem for the wrong person. I've done this in the past, built a great system for the underwriters, but the brokers looked and went, yeah, I'm not doing that. I'll rather just fax you over the proposal form. Thanks very much. And we didn't get any benefit from it. And then the other problem that's consistent, I see a lot, is starting with the solution. So tech's exciting. There's some great things out there. You know, John's been talking about our workbench. It's fabulous, but it solves problems for certain areas. Doesn't necessarily mean it's going to solve your particular problem. And often, and we'll talk about it in a little bit later, you often need more than just that single item to be able to solve your problem. So start with your problem first, think about it from that shape and come forwards. So all very depressing and sad, but there are ways that you can address this. Pop forward, thank you. So we use an approach within CGI called managed innovation, and it looks against 3 lenses. So when you're looking at your problems, if you line them into the 3 different views, when you're looking at your own problems and your own challenges, look at them from these particular perspectives. So the first one, from a business case point of view, is it viable? Have we really understood the business benefit we're driving? Can I put my finger on that? It might not necessarily be a cash benefit, but you really need to understand what benefit I'm driving from a business perspective. If you don't have that, it's unlikely that project will win. Second one is about the human desirability side of it. So is it desirable? Have I actually thought about everybody in that process? And is everybody going to benefit? Often a program will go wrong where I'm trying to change something where I fixed it in one area, and that's great for one person, but it hasn't worked downstream or upstream. It's made their life more difficult. Again, the project's probably going to run into problems. And then the final one, taking it back to the self-driving car, is it technically feasible? So if I'm looking at the software, does it solve my problem and my particular area? Because we're all relatively unique in how we do things. And is it only solving part of my problem? And do I actually need to bring multiple bits together? And we sort of think about this as sort of a Lego brick analogy. Often you won't get a single piece of software that will solve everything for you. You've got to bolt different bits together. And as John says, as an SI, that's one of the jobs that we do. How do I bring the different bits together? If you look at it from those three areas, you will more than likely make sure that you're a success. And I tend to keep, particularly when we get busy and we're running through things, need to just keep an eye on, am I making people's lives easier? No one wanted their life more difficult. If you're making someone else's life more difficult, you're probably not going to win again. And again, that's across all of the sections. So hopefully we'll sort of give you a bit of a perspective there in terms of how you become more likely to succeed if you frame the challenge in the right way. But I'm going to hand over to Tim now, who's going to talk about it from a human perspective. Are you capable enough to press your own button?
I think I'm
Good.
okay. Yeah.
Excellent.
Yes.
I feel like he owes you.
He does, big time. I'll get my beer later.
All right. Is the future of underwriting still human? Look, first and foremost, I'm passionate about technology. I spent my entire career using technology to help insurers transform the way that they work. So it seems somewhat interesting to come to this sort of environment and say, well, actually, the future of underwriting is human. Surely where we are with technology and all the promises that we've heard over the last decade around artificial intelligence, that the world's moving on. And so when I was looking at, preparing for the talk today, I really wanted to help give you guys a few pointers around where the technology is going, where we're seeing change, and actually why the statements of the future of underwriting is human is just as valid now as it was 20 years ago. So let's start off by looking at AI. AI is not just one technology. Artificial intelligence is a massive collection of different technologies. And as in the example that Darren gave us with self-driving cars, very difficult challenge to solve. When you start refining the challenge back to one problem, you start getting a much better use case for artificial intelligence. So AI that's out there today, and we see it in things like Alexa, they're good at doing one thing really, really well, right? So there's a collection of different technologies. And so when we look at then the difference between that and human intelligence, well, actually human intelligence is proven to be, that our abilities of our brain to be able to do that analysis and combine different methods, different models together and thinking together. And when we think about the underwriting expertise and the complexity of the market and the different underwriting permutations and factors that go into drive risk, actually it's that ability to look at all of the different characteristics, be able to adapt and deal with uncertainty within that process and combine that together. So dealing with complex risk, it really is, ensuring that, the human in the loop, and this is a term you'll hear quite a bit, it's ensuring that the underwriter has the information that they need to be able to almost focus on the signal that's in the noise, right? Over the last 10 years, the amount of data sources available to us as individuals has exploded, right? What we can do with technology has exploded, but in some sense, as the world gets more complex, we get more transparency around and understanding around those uncertainties. We actually need to ensure that the human is in the loop and they've got enough time to factor on the signal that's in that noise and to do the analysis and identify what's important and bring that into the way that they approach underwriting. So you can kind of think about this as that combining the data and the technology that enables that flow of data into our day-to-day jobs, and then allowing us to apply that scientific analysis at point of underwriting. And when you think about it, what gets measured is what gets managed. So having the ability to get the information at point of underwriting to expose those connections that aren't on first surface, easily understood, easily identifiable, is a key enabler for the underwriter of the future. So we put a little asterisk on this of why we think the future of underwriting is still human, because we actually do think it is still human, but it's with it's the augmentation of technology and data at the fingertips of the underwriter that will really help drive benefit in terms of how our industry progresses over time. So I wanted to give one really concrete example for the audience here today of just how we think that combination of technology, data, and human expertise can really come together in an effective way. And as Darren said, this is about ensuring that we're focusing on the right problem. So a really good example of that is, over the last 2 years, we've had a change in the way the market works as a result of the hybrid working, as we've all dealt with COVID and having to work in the hybrid fashion. And even today, how we operate hasn't gone back to how we were operating in 2019. So we know from talking with underwriters that are out there that just the volume of conversations, requests for information, transactions that are coming their way through lots of different channels is a key problem. And I've spoken to people who are saying they're looking at 10, 15, 20% of the information that's coming in. They're having to triage at a very basic level in tools like Outlook. And so when we were looking at this problem space and going, well, how can we identify the right technologies to address that problem? We felt actually the automatic scoring of underwriting appetite at point of that conversation is a key enabler, is one of those areas where we're actually combining a couple of different bits of technology, some data extraction, some business logic, a little bit of workflow, to actually enable the underwriter to automatically score their risk and not tell them what they have to do with it, but help inform them, help bubble up to the top the higher value opportunities that may come through. And that might not necessarily be immediately obvious on first pass of an email, right? If you've got so much business coming through that you're not able to actually read through every message and respond to every request, you're going to be missing opportunities. So that ability to filter and triage against the business appetite and ensuring that then the data that helps them take the next step and respond appropriately and seize those opportunities against their own business risk appetite and selection, and just where their particular exposure or their portfolio is at that point in time, is where we felt was a real key enabler for underwriters to help maintain that competitive edge. All right. And we talk about this a lot. That's just one example of where a couple of different technologies really can help prioritize and make a meaningful difference to the top line of an insurer. And we've spoken to clients who have done that and have seen those sorts of benefits, not because of it's a massive digital transformation and change, but because they just went, let's just do this one thing really, really well that solved this part of the problem. And that's had a massive impact to their business. All right. And then suddenly you move on to the next thing and the next thing. So I've missed one of my final points on there. So about building that competitive edge, often it comes back to how you want to operate your business, right? In the wider insurance industry, we see this through talking to all the different clients. There are lots of different business models out there. So when we were sitting down and thinking about Workbench and how to support those different operating models, we sat and we kind of mapped them through. Is it an expert-led underwriting process that's active and requires that deep insight to the complexity of the risk that's coming through? Or if it's there's something much more like the personal lines type of products that are out there, which is a straight through processing model, and it's all about getting a quote back as quickly and as efficiently as possible. And I think when we sort of reflect on these types of tools and these types of platforms, actually starting with the business problem, getting the operating model well understood, and then bringing the technology that best supports that operating model is a key enabler for how to be successful, as per what Darren was talking about around these types of changes. The second thing, and as I said in my introduction, we've got a wealth of data at our fingertips. I'm going to talk through each of the little pictures here and just explain why I put each picture on the screen, because that wealth of data really does, depending on your operating model, can have a big impact in terms of the way that you run your business. Okay, so let's look at the very first one on the top left. I think of that's your client supplied data. So that's your submission, or the supplementary information that's coming in, whether it's via a placement platform, whether it's via an email channel, whether it's via some sort of distribution portal or broker network, or whatever that method of transmission is. That first request, that bundle of information you're getting given, that client supplied information, sometimes that's supplemented with your broker or whoever it is that the information is coming from. But that really is, that first point. And most of today's conversations around things like the CDR, they tend to focus on that, how we're going to get that information flowing through the market. And I'm really pleased that we're seeing the types of changes in our market that we are at the moment. And I'm really excited to see that come through. So that's the first set of information. Okay. The next set is what I call the data enrichment. So this is the bottom left for people who are following, the nice little hand touching the information panel. Data enrichment services. We have seen in the last 10 years particularly a wealth of new data sets come available to us in the insurance market, right? And the price point of those data sets is so far cheaper than what data used to cost us as an industry. So what that is also doing is those data enrichment services are allowing you to get a unique view or another view on the information coming in. And the reason I wanted to highlight just these two first is often we get client supplied data, which isn't particularly good. Well, sometimes rather than having to try and fix that loop back with the client, actually looking to your data enrichment services and using that instead to augment it and qualify the accuracy of the information is a far easier, cheaper, more effective way to clean up the data before you even start the underwriting process. The third one, so this is the hard hat on the screen. This is, I think, of your expert insight. This is your third party or a different part of your organization who takes that data away. They might be looking at, I don't know, the portfolio ags. They might be looking at, I don't know, maybe it's structural survey inspections. I don't know. It could be really dependent on what type of organization you have and how you operate your business. But that BPO type outsource where you are going, what is the expert insight? I need somebody who's really knowledgeable in this area to come back to give me their opinion around this before I make my underwriting decision. Okay, so that's your third data set. That's one of those areas where actually we're starting to see some really interesting AI use cases popping up in there as well, where that expert knowledge for those types of services, they're augmenting the way that they work with AI to be able to turn around that service a lot faster. So whereas traditionally you'd have to wait a couple of days to get a response, it becomes something that you can get a first indicative view on. Now, the next one, people often overlook the value of this one. This is and this is the middle bottom. This is the negotiated insight. So as we transact business, particularly in the specialty market, as information flows backwards and forwards between the client, the broker, the insurer, as you're going through that negotiation, going through the pricing process, additional data insights will come out of that process. And sometimes you might get challenged back on the price. Well, sometimes it might be if you get additional insights back from the end client as part of that negotiation process, and being able to collect and augment that data is also another valuable source of data. Next one. Now I'm at the top right. This is your historic claims data. So making sure that those prior experiences that we have as an organization is plugged into that process. And then bottom right, which is traditionally the underwriting process, the analysis, the technical pricing. the forward pricing models that you have. Do you just price it in one particular way? Do you price it multiple different ways? Getting to your position and understanding of that risks. There's a lot of different data sets there. There's a lot of different points in the process. And that could be highly automated, or that could be a very manual process. And it depends on the organization. It depends on your operating model as a business. And that's why Darren's point around what problem are you trying to solve is such an important one, because if you don't have that focus first and foremost, you can spend a lot of time and effort automating the wrong thing. So talking about all these data sets, ultimately, when we looked at this through the lens of our Workbench product, we really wanted to ensure we gave users the ability to put their fingers on the right data at the right time. And the focus is to get the signal from the noise, right? Get the information that's important at that point in time to inform the next step in the process. The one thing I would say as a takeaway from today is you can't ignore the availability of data, and actually going through that process and challenging yourselves over what information would help me do my job more better is a key question everybody should be asking themselves. All right. As you look at, so I'm a strategist, I'm a technologist. When we look at technology and the impact that it has on us and our businesses, our lives, our society, we tend to overestimate the short-term impact of technology. I remember when the iPhone came out in 2007, this concept of an app store, and I thought, oh, this is fantastic. This is going to be absolutely everywhere. And it took quite a while before it became that, you know, everybody has an iPhone equivalent device of equivalent standard and quality in their pocket. But now if you think about what you can do with your phone, what you can do in terms of the way that we bank, the way that we communicate, that overall impact that it's had on us as a society is far greater than when the iPhone was originally launched. So originally it was we overestimated the impact it was going to have on society, but in the long term, we underestimated just the overall change that we've had. So where I want to leave you guys with today from an AI perspective, and keep that in the back of your mind, I don't think AI is going to replace the underwriter anytime soon. But I do think the underwriter who uses artificial intelligence is going to replace the one who doesn't. Right? And it's ensuring that you've got the right tools at your fingertips to your job. So that's my key takeaway. I'm not sure how I'm going for time, am I?
You've gone over slightly.
Gone over slightly, am I? Okay, right.
That's right.
So we've got another slideshow at this point. So QR code is on the screen. For anybody who struggled with the first time round, all you need to do is pull your phone out. Great example of AI, actually. They automatically detects there's a QR code in the image, should pop up with a link, click on the link, and that will take you directly to the website, which is our second poll. Give people a minute or two. Please do use Slido, answer the polls if you can, because we will come at the end to the Q&A and look at the results and share them and discuss them with the group in the room.
Awesome. Thanks, Tim. So looks like everybody's closed out. I'm trying to do the double thing again, haven't I? Yeah. So hopefully Tim's given you a bit of a flavour there on how you can apply the technology, but also how you need to think about it from a pragmatic point of view. As Tim says, you can use a lot of the technology to get to the data that you want, but I think we also need to be realistic about the limits of some of those technologies as well. Again, extracting data out of an MRC, you can get so far with that type of technology, but it's not going to extract everything. It's getting cleverer, but right now it will not extract everything for you. And in particular, you've got to be quite mindful of when you want that data and in what format and why. But technology's fab, it's going to do loads of good things. We're all sitting in the room, we're thinking, brilliant, that can take a load of my time away. I can get on and actually do the thing I really want to do, which is underwrite. However, those of us who've been around for a little while are also sitting there a little bit nervous because we're thinking, well, I've seen this before. Technology projects fail, they overpromise and I don't get what I want at the end of it. So how do you make sure that you aren't relying on these software silver bullets, but you actually look at it in a slightly different way? And I think actually the conversation starts by being a bit honest. And I'm probably going to get shot by my boss in terms of around this, but digital transformation is hard. It's really quite difficult to do. And actually, I really don't like the word digital transformation. I know it's been used a few times and it's used a lot, because digital transformation isn't about anything digital. It's about people. It's about making sure that the people who are going to be digitally transformed buy into it, actually get the benefit out of it and understand how they're going to work with it. So I think part of it is actually looking at the other way around. How am I going to get the people that need to do things differently are going to get the benefit out of it, are going to buy into that? How do I actually make sure those people are going to come along with me? Because big transformation is really difficult. We know that. I've been in the market a long time. I've seen multiple versions of Blueprint 2 come and go. I'm fingers crossed that this one is going to come through for us and make a difference. And the reason we're all a little bit wary about digital transformation and why we get nervous about it, particularly in terms of winning hearts and minds for anybody who's been around for a while, is technology has overpromised. Vendors are very, very good at selling an idea and a concept, sorry, John, and bringing that through to actual reality. We've been sold lots and lots of times. If I take it back to that self-driving car analogy, we all thought, and I did, in 5, 6, 7 years, we were going to be driving around in cars that took us to the pub and back, and that would be fantastic, but it isn't there. And it's a bit of a shame because we often also then grab onto software can solve all of my problems. I'm going to be able to get this piece of software and it will solve it for me. And a lot of people, including business and the technologists, really want that to happen because it would be nice, wouldn't it, if a piece of software turned up and it just fixed everything. It's not that straightforward. There are lots of challenges in reality in terms of how you do that. You've got to think about all of those different perspectives I talked about earlier in terms of, is it right for the people? Is it right from a business case? And actually, can the technology bring it together? And the other challenge we've got is the market's moving fast. There's lots of change coming at us. And I can't really wait for 12, 18 months before anything changes. I need to see, and no one in the room really wants to wait that long before anything changes. So how, again, do we look at things in a different way so that we're not waiting for that long before we can actually make a difference in the market? So that all sounds a bit depressing, but we've worked through a lot of times now, and I've been around in change programs for a long time. I think there are ways that you can increase the odds of success. And partly the reason we want to go through this with you is if you are sitting on the other side, a lot of underwriters here today, you are thinking about what's in it for me? How do I make sure this is going to work? These are good things just to think about in terms of, is my organisation that I'm working with actually doing these things? And first one not on there, look for the teams that actually want to change. I know this sounds like a daft thing to say, but I've sat in so many programs where those people who are involved in the change program really don't want to change. They're not that interested. Now, often you look at it and think, well, they're the team that could get the most benefit out of it, but they're just not ready yet. So look for those teams that actually do want to change. It might not change the needle completely, but if you can get those people on board, you're more likely to win and do something fast and get there quicker. And if you can win the hearts and minds of those people, you can then start to bring others with you, because one team's doing really well with the new technology, someone else is going to want a bit of that, but they don't always want to go first. So look for those people that want to change. And then when you're working with those people, look for specific problems that you can solve quickly, rather than something that's going to be really hard to do. And the reason for looking at that, as Tim said before, is if you look down and solve the problem quickly, you again start to buy into people start to buy into then that this process is working, that I can make a difference. So look for those things the whole way through where I can achieve something in 6, 12, 8 weeks, rather than 4, 5, 6 months. When I'm looking at smaller problems, the other thing to do is don't spend too much time, and I see this a lot actually, people spend so much time mapping out what they do today. The whole purpose of the new technologies and the ways of working is you are going to do things differently. So you can spend 6, 12 months actually mapping out your underwriting processes today before you start to transition them. But as soon as you've started to move on to these new systems, people start to think and do things in a different way. It's much more important to think about getting that new technology in the hands of some people who can start to think about how they do things differently and then adapt and learn. But you need to start from a point that you expect your people to learn, move. And the key part of that is making sure you've got that feedback loop coming through. So you have built up a way that those people that were using the systems can talk back to you, you feed that back in again, and then you look to then continue to improve. Because actually the problem you thought you were solving day one when you launched that new capability, that person's then just learned over the last 6 to 8 weeks in terms of how they do things. So the problem they thought they were going to have next, the one that they wanted you to deliver next, actually has changed. So constantly you'll be moving around in terms of looking at how the platforms are actually going to make the difference in terms of how you work. And that's going to be a really important thing in terms of the types of technology you look like. And I'll bring you back to that Lego brick analogy. One thing won't solve all of this. So make sure that you've got an open way of bringing different capabilities together to actually solve those problems, because they will shift and change as you move forwards. And then really, what we want to be looking at there is keep asking yourself the whole way through, right at the start, what problem are we trying to solve and why? But keep asking yourself that, because it will change. If I'm 6 months into a program of work and I've delivered a few different things, that problem that I thought I had right up front may have changed. The market may have moved on. Blueprint 2 will have delivered some stuff. The joint venture will have made some changes. So keep asking yourself that question. It's a really important one to have. Now, I'm aware of the people in the room, at least we are between you and some sandwiches, at least, if you haven't already had it. So I'm going to wrap up there, and then we can open up some Q&A if there is any. But really, hopefully, to give you some insights there in terms of how you need to think about the problem up front. So if I want to make underwriting better, I want to spend more time underwriting, how do I need to think about all of the areas I need to think about? Where's the business case? Who's involved in that change? And am I making sure that everybody's life is going to be better? And actually, as golden and as shiny as the cool technology is it really going to help me solve my problem, or do I need to shift the focus? And as Tim says, there's some great technology out there. It's going to continue to improve, and we're seeing constant change and churn in terms of the capabilities there, but be pragmatic about the technology and how it will solve your problem, and maybe rethink your problem a little bit in terms of getting the best out of the technology that it is today. You can always change it later on as you move forwards. And then the final bit is, don't believe all the hype, but be pragmatic. And there are ways that you can take smaller, more continuous, faster steps to pull in those values earlier on, and work in smaller teams with people who really want to work with you. So I'm going to stop there. Again, Slido for anybody that didn't do it. I don't know, Julie, whether we got in terms of the poll.
All right, I've got them here.
Lack of structured information.
Okay, so I'm going to repeat what you said there, Julie, just for the people on the call. So the question was, what is the biggest frustration in underwriting in the market today? And it was fairly evenly split between lack of structured information and rekeying between systems. Really not surprised to hear that feedback. The next one down was administration and reporting. And then after that, key information hidden in documents and too many submissions, too many emails. Okay,
not surprising to anybody in the room or online, what you'd expect to hear. Yeah.
Excellent. I think we had a technical issue on the second poll. And the fact that it was my job to start it, I don't think I did. I don't know, it looks like Julie, did you? Julie started it. Thank you, Julie, very much.
Excellent.
Excellent. And we've got the word.
So sometimes the human in the loop is not the human you want. You can add the clicker, but
that's what I was trying to say with the operating model, right? Make sure you've got the right people operating your technology. In this case, Julie's taking care of it for me. So thank you very much, Julie. Where could technology make the biggest difference? So efficiency was, top votes, data preparation, automation, and then the credibility of data, which is really good. We had a few more. Time, providing data, sorting, processing, data feeds, and in the submission stage and in submissions themselves. So very much that upfront first stage of underwriting, the triage, how do we filter the wheat for the chaff?
So that's it from the poll side of it. We just really wanted to open up the floor or to anybody online. If anybody had any questions, I'm not going to force you to answer or ask questions. If you'd rather go and get a sandwich, we can let you have 10 minutes of your life back. Yes.
Have a quick statement, then maybe an existential question, so we won't have time. The statement that I like the term robot in the loop rather than human in the loop, because I think we were going for human in the loop a few years ago. We thought the machine were going to take over, and so the human just had to deal with the exception. But the way you've just described it, essentially, the thing, it's still a human-centric process, but we're outsourcing to the robots a whole bunch of bits as we go. The question you said earlier, something on data, which was, if our data's not great, which I only tend to agree, is trying to fix it the right thing, or can we actually go and look at external sources to clean it up? And so I think the existential question, having been both an ops guy and a data person, is that the right answer? Because we very quickly get to higher quality data, which we use for data-driven decision making, or are we, by doing that, are we letting people get away with poor data quality?
That's a really good question. It's a bit of a it depends question, because it depends what you're using the data for, right? And whether it's data coming in through your client, or if it's you've got poor quality data, you should be thinking about the risk associated with that. What is the impact if you have a misclassification? What is the, when you've got data-driven processing, and especially as organizations adopt more automation, there's almost a data governance side of this where you go, okay, but are we clear about where our systemic risk is in our own operations? And are we happy with the controls we've got around that, and what the impact it could be to our business if there are issues with maybe it's that third-party data provider you're using, or actually the information that's being supplied to you, at good faith.
I've got an opinion on that one. I think this comes down to thinking about the wider value chain overall. I've had a sort of little niggle in my brain for a long while now, in terms of, if you really want good quality data, then how do we make the life easier for the insureds to actually collect the data that adds value to their business, that gives us the quality of data that we want? I think we struggle a little bit in terms of, we're asking people to produce a load of data that is just a pain in the backside for them to actually create, and they only do it whenever they want some insurance. I think and I've seen some companies look at that. Archipelago is quite a good example of an organization that took a look at it in a different way, and has looked up the chain and gone, if I solve the problem for the customer, and I actually get their environment to be better shaped, and I help them solve the problem, and the outside of that is I then get the data in the shape I need it, and it creates better quality, then there's that win-win situation. I think that's where, if you look at those three lenses that you can look at, if I'm solving a problem up the chain, then I think down the chain. But unfortunately, the market, I think, tends to think a little bit too much about what's happening within the market rather than what's happening with the customer. Don't know what your view or opinion is on that.
That makes sense. Ultimately, if the customer's got good data, then it should just be down. So should we be making better use of that? Yeah,
I think so. Yes.
Thank you for your everything you've said so far. Just a question on implementing all of these systems, like workbench and the like. What would you say to teams trying hard to implement this stuff, but the reality of it is that you have that initial time commitment, you can kind of double your workload trying to still manage the way you run business and operate, to then trying to implement this new technology that will help you. How would you recommend managing that initial time investment from teams?
It's a really good question. Take that first, and I'll hand over to Tim. I think there's two bits. As I said before, I think people can spend too much time trying to think about what they do today, and I've seen lots of time where you spend 6, 8, 9 months with BAs actually trying to map current processes before we move forwards. And I think that isn't needed. I get we've got lots of complex processes and the rest of it, but if I start fairly small and I free up some time, I find a way to free up some time for the teams, then there's a sort of a virtuous loop that by solving some problems and freeing up some time in one small area, that gives the team the time to actually work in another area. I also think we have a view on how those things can work. Other suppliers and vendors will also have a view of what's there. Rather than coming to you with a blank sheet of paper, I think we should be looking and saying, I think the world could look like this for you. I think this is how you could solve this problem. Why can't your team move to this now and start to use it, rather than say, let's start with a blank sheet of paper and try and invent the wheel? I think there's a way of moving there faster by actually coming in with a malleable position at the end that you can change and adapt, rather than trying to force through. And then the final bit is, don't try and solve everything in one go. It comes back to Tim's point on data. You don't need all of your data in a really structured way to make a difference. Even 20% of it being slightly better, or saving 20% of your time, frees up the rest of your underwriters' time or your team's time to work on other areas. I think sometimes we try and do too much all in one go. And I think that comes partly back to the fact that in the old days when I was around, if you didn't get your project done there and then, you weren't getting another shot at it. Whereas today, there's that continual change and churn and improvement. And I think some people worry that you've got to get it all in front and everything's got to move to a new way of working. So I think slice it up smaller. Don't come with a blank sheet of paper, but actually work with your suppliers and vendors with using their opinion, and ask the question, why not, rather than how do I? And then simplify it down, try and free up some time for the underwriters to then do the next stage through. Anything to add?
That's fairly comprehensive. I'd probably just say, ask the question of, how do we reduce the risk in this delivery, right? In the technology field, I'm sure everybody's heard of the concept of agile delivery. That's about small iterative changes. Get really, really comfortable with the fact that you're making a change within your organization. Get your teams used to the fact that those changes are happening. And it's easier said than done, to be honest. But when you ask yourselves the question of, how do we reduce the risk with this delivery? How do we focus on just one or two small changes, see the value of that change, and then make the next change? So incremental changes really does, I think, help address that situation, because then you're not trying to do two major activities side by side. You're able to see the benefits of that change, operationalize it, and then move on to the next thing.
Yeah, and I think, sorry, Artie, yeah.
If I may have a question to Kim. I actually
Sure.
I would like to take advantage of you being on the panel. So you are, of course, in Blueprint 2. So Blueprint 2 promises are CDR and IMRC, right? So
yeah.
common data records and intelligent market for contract. So imagine the future arrives, right? And tomorrow all the data is structured in our fingertips, you press the button. So the tools like the ones that Darren and Tim described, are they less important or more important in your future?
Well, going back to Tim's comments earlier around just the sheer volume and availability of data, just because we've managed to digitalize the initial slip submission, MRC, and then store it in a structured way, I don't think that takes away from the very high probability that you should be able to augment that data. Now, that might not be something that we do in the centre, because let's be honest, it really sits more in the USP, in the four walls of our members. But we have 70 plus members. The LMA has 60 plus members, and LIBA has a lot more than that. Apologies to all brokers and LIBA for not knowing the exact number. And each and every one of them will always be thinking about, how do I add value? How do I augment that data? What can I do for my clients or my internal ops people sometimes? But I don't think it takes away from what's being offered here. I think it provides the opportunity to work with a certain amount of certainty and then bring the augmentation.
So the following question, so the organization which adopt the tools like the ones proposed, they'll gain competitive advantage of the ones who don't? I mean, does it give people competitive advantage?
Organisations gain competitive advantage in many, many different ways. And I will make you no guarantees about the route to success. Unfortunately, I wish I had that magic wand, but I would definitely say that a combination of the right people, the right tools, and using those tools to facilitate the jobs of the right people, that's probably going to set you off in a good direction.
You have a
robot in the loop.
I think we're pretty much out of time, aren't we?
It's always nice to bring it to a close exactly at that point. If you're hanging around, it'd be great to have a conversation with you afterwards. Got some refreshments being served. Thank you very much for joining us, and to everyone that joined online as well. and we'll look forward to catching up with you again soon.
Thank you.